Good afternoon, everybody. Are we rolling? We're having some technical difficulties here. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for our session, Partnering to Keep Kids in School and Out of Court. We're so glad that you could join us for a really important discussion about this topic. So my name is Lane Carr, and I am the Director of Accountability at the Nebraska Department of Education. And I'm joined by two colleagues that are really in the trenches every day working to keep kids in school and out of jail. And so I'm excited and honored to be on this panel and would like to invite Amber to introduce herself and her work.
I'm Amber Pond. I'm the program director here in Saunders County for the Saunders County Youth Services Office.
And my name is Chris Turner. I'm the Chief Deputy of the Juvenile Division with the Lancaster County Attorney's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I've been a prosecutor for about 13 years. 4 of that has been in the world of juvenile justice, and part of the responsibilities of the County Attorney's Office is obviously through statute to address habitual truancy and educational neglect. So I'm also excited to be part of the panel here today, and I'm going to ask Lane, turn it back over to him to go through our agenda.
Thanks, Amber and Chris. Really excited to hear about the work specifically in your 2 offices in Saunders County and Lancaster County. So our agenda today is to kind of take a step back. And the reason that I was asked to be on this panel is to speak just a little bit to the scope of the chronic absence issue in Nebraska, the extent of it, understanding what it means, and then the key research around chronic absence and how it relates to this topic of juvenile justice involved youth. Then we're going to speak to Amber and Chris about the specific examples, the specific work that they are doing in their counties, and just 2 prime examples of the ways that partnerships work for our kids. And then throughout, please feel free to throw any questions. Amber's going to be watching the chat and interrupting if necessary. And then we'll also have time at the end of our session for any questions. So once again, thanks for joining. And I'm going to kick us off with just a little bit about attendance. And it makes common sense, folks, right? The most important thing for our students to be able to learn is for them to first show up, right? We know this too, that when we look at the research, that there are empirical studies that show that students who miss more school do worse academically. And Nebraska-based research shows that around the 8-day mark is when we see a drop in attendance, is when we see it drop in grades, drop in test scores as well. We also know that diminished academic achievement compounds over time. So if it starts in the middle school grades, it affects the high school grades and ultimately can lead to difficulty in graduation. We also see that there are relationships among truancy rates with academic achievement, greater discipline histories, and then again, dropping out. And so this last piece, and all of this research came from a 2015 study from the Center on American Progress, but school absence, I just really appreciated this quotation. School absence results in absence from the community and presence in the criminal justice system, right? It makes common sense, but it is also shown that attendance matters, and it matters a lot. Now, I want to make sure that we're really clear on what I'm going to be speaking about today, which is chronic absence. So chronic absence and truancy are fundamentally different, and you'll see me reference a lot of the work from our partners at AttendanceWorks, and you can find a lot more from them at attendanceworks.org, attendanceworks.org. Lots of research, lots of resources that I think could be helpful for school and community-based organizations. While truancy is really focused on those unexcused absences and focused on the legal and administrative solutions, chronic absence, as you're going to see in our data, is really focused on all of those absences: excused, unexcused, suspensions, expulsions, etc. And it's really focused on a preventative, what can we do to ensure that students don't reach that truancy standpoint. So in Nebraska and with the Department of Education, we've defined chronically absent students as those that miss 10% of their time in membership. And we give you a couple examples here of Blake, who was only enrolled in his school for 50 days, missed 5 of those days, and would therefore be chronically absent. So while Blake wouldn't be truant, he is chronically absent, and that should be a red flag for school and community partners. Mona misses 18 days out of 175 and is chronically absent. Still not truant, but we know that there's something wrong, that this might be a pattern, that there might be in or out of school issues that are causing this chronic absence. So there are 3 things that I want to share with you that I hope illustrate the extent of the problem in Nebraska. The first is that chronic absence is not isolated to just urban spaces. Chronic absence is a rural and urban issue in Nebraska. So I'm sharing with you this map that is from the Hamilton Project that mapped our chronic absence. And you can see the chronic absence rate is really spread out across the state. In 2015, there were 33,000 students that were chronically absent. Bringing that home to a little bit closer, in 2018 and 19, almost 45,000 students were chronically absent in the state of Nebraska. I want that number to sink in. 45,000, roughly the size of Grand Island or Kearney-ish, right? We're missing at least 10% of their time in membership. The most recent data that we have from the 1920 school year, right? The one that we just finished, in 3 quarters of school, right? 3 quarters before we moved to online learning, almost 31,000 students were chronically absent. So we know that this is an issue. Nebraska does fairly well educationally. Nebraska does fairly well in the chronic absence with our low chronic absence rate. But 31,000 students, 45,000 students is unacceptable to me and unacceptable to our State Board of Education that has really set a priority on reduction of this chronic absenteeism. So chronic absence is both seen in rural and urban-ish areas. Many of our small schools see upwards of 70, 80, 90% chronic absence. And so we know that this is an issue just like it is in Lincoln, Omaha, Grand Island, Norfolk, all of those other larger schools. The other thing that we know about chronic absence, again, looking back at the 2018 and 19 school year, is that chronic absence disproportionately affects students of color. Chronic absence is a clear equity measure for how schools are doing to serve the students that have been marginalized or historically disenfranchised. So you'll see in this chart of Nebraska data, the percent of the population as the lighter color blue, right next to the percent of chronically absent students. So again, you can see those disproportionalities, those disproportionate effects of chronic absence. We have to ask ourselves, what is the root cause of these disproportionalities? And we see those same sorts of disproportionalities in academic achievement, suspensions, expulsions. And at a certain point, we also need to come to grips with the fact that that isn't a coincidence, that there are these disproportionalities. So again, thinking really deeply, thinking really clearly about the root causes of some of these issues. And then more importantly, where I'm excited for this conversation to turn is on some of those solutions that are community-based. So chronic absenteeism is a rural and urban issue. It also disproportionately affects some students, including students that are economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities. So once again, you'll see these disproportionalities present for students with disabilities and the economically disadvantaged, which we consider those that received free and reduced price lunch. The final thing that I wanted to share is kind of final 2 things is kind of some trends that we see in chronic absence by grade. We have this very similar U-shaped chronic absence where 0 represents kindergarten and 12 represents the senior year of school. Certainly we see that beginning in around 5th grade, the acceleration of chronic absence. And we also know too that it's a pattern. Chronic absence is a pattern and unfortunately very predictable. So if a student is chronically absent in kindergarten, it's likely that they're going to be chronically absent throughout their time within the school system. So attacking this issue at the earliest grades, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first and second, is absolutely critical. We also need to think critically about the engagement strategies and the partnership opportunities that we have for middle and high school students specifically. And then the last little bit of data that I would share with you is just how important it is for us to not just focus on the 20 plus days. We miss opportunities to intervene much earlier if we don't do that. So what I've shown you in this graph is the students by grade level, once again, with 10 in the blue, 15 in the red, and 20 plus days of absences in the yellow. We're missing a lot of students that are at risk, right? So we need to be thinking not just waiting until the 20-day absence mark, but really starting to think about some of those early warning signs, some of the early factors that may be coming into play that help us understand and help us better address why students are missing school. So again, this comes from our partners at Attendance Works, and folks may be asking, well, what is causing students to be absent? What are some of the reasons that students aren't coming to school? And there's a misconception that it's not within school or the adults in the system's control. And there are a lot of things that are out of a school system's control, but thinking about these 4 areas, I think are absolutely critical. The barriers like health issues or access to health care, trauma that a student may be have encountered in their lifetime. And you also see in this barriers the involvement with the child welfare or juvenile justice system that can often keep kids from school. There may be examples of negative school experiences, bullying or suspensions, or negative attitudes from the parents due to this as well. Also, an undiagnosed disability that may be causing a student to be disengaged. And speaking of that disengagement, this idea of a lack of engagement right here. So what is a school doing to make sure that the school environment, the classes, the materials that students are learning are engaging, right? And make sense and are meaningful to them as a person. And then the final piece is around misconception. So one of the things that we've just been really trying to do at the department is clarify what we mean by chronic absence, right? 2 days a month is roughly what it takes to be chronically absent. And it's critical. It may not seem like a lot, but it's absolutely critical to the long-term academic and overall well-being of children. So what can we do about it, right? So our friends at Attendance Works, again, it sounds like I'm a paid commercial for them, but I promise that I'm not. They just put out some really good work. Our friends at Attendance Works talk about a 3-tiered approach to attacking the issue of chronic absence. And that first is really just thinking about the overall well-being of students in the school, making sure that the climate is safe, making sure that families and students feel engaged, safe, and that they have a meaningful experience there. So that could be things like bulletin boards, banners, attendance messaging that is positive, right? Trying to tell students that coming to school is important and celebrating those students that are coming to school. As we narrow, we know that fewer students are going to need this tier 2 interventions, but it's really starting to be more personalized. So thinking through some action planning, students having mentors or a personal outreach. So this could mean a call. There's a lot of research out there about nudges and how a simple text message, a simple letter, a simple phone call can make such a big difference. This tier 3 is the most intensive, the most expensive, and also perhaps the most difficult to implement. But it's really about a coordinated school and interagency response. So thinking through those community partners that we have in place. So this could be placing students in contact with organizations that can help meet their needs. It could be setting up a specific plan for an intervention for that student. And it could also be sharing that data with the appropriate agencies to make sure that there is some accountability and that there is some follow through. What I want you to note, and this I think just cannot be understated, is that the last resort in this conversation is around legal intervention. It should and can be used as an important tool to, get students to school, create a sense of urgency around attendance. And we know that it isn't the end all be all and should definitely not be the first thing that we turn to. So the final thing that I'm going to share, and this is just a little foray into the burgeoning research here, and then we're so excited to hear from Amber and Chris about their work. But there is some really important research that I wanted to share. A couple of studies from South Carolina, and then an organization called Foster Ed that has created a kind of framework for attendance and achievement for students. So in South Carolina, they really studied juvenile justice involved youth, and they saw that the involvement alone in that programming not only didn't improve attendance, it actually created worse attendance. Students were missing even more school. So I appreciate this kind of call to action here is, are juvenile justice system involvement and school disciplinary measures the most effective way to keep kids in school and help them succeed? And that's the question that I hope that we can kind of, pose. And then I think Amber and Chris are going to kind of get us to as well. And then the final piece that I will share and be willing to pause for any quick questions before we transition is this organization called Foster Ed has a framework where they have basically three pieces that come together: an education champion, an education team, and a student-centered engagement team that is working together to think through the specific, individualized, intensive needs that students are going to have in order to be successful, creating almost like an individualized plan for each child to understand, again, those root causes, to create a plan for the solutions, and then ultimately track and support the student ultimately to that success. So once again, I'm very excited to join you today to talk about this chronic absence issue. And I will pause there to see if there are any questions that we might have. And then otherwise, I'm going to kick it over to Amber.
Yes, Lane, you have a question. What is your definition of legal intervention?
Yeah, so that would be where we would probably go into like the truancy court and thinking about so one of the common misconceptions that I get when I was first talking about chronic absence was, well, we just need our county attorneys to do something. We need our county attorneys to call the parents. We need to get the county attorneys involved to do something to the parents and to the students to really make this feel urgent, feel like it's important for students to go to work. And by all means, I'm not, or go to school. So by all means, I'm not saying that that shouldn't be used. And I think as we're about to find out, our county attorneys are really starting to think about this from a let's be preventative, let's be proactive, and let's be at the table from the very beginning so that we don't have to use some of those more heavy-handed interventions at the end.
And then they also asked if you are an AHS Bulldog.
I am an AHS Bulldog. Yes. Go Big Red. Yes, that's so funny. Hello to my Ainsworth fan there, whoever that was.
Is Randy C.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to stick around, but for now, I'm going to stop my share, and then I'm going to turn it over to Amber to speak to a really important example of how it takes a whole village to attack this issue. So thanks for having me, and I'll turn it over to Amber.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Pond. Like I said earlier, I'm with Saunders County Youth Services. So just a little bit, just to kind of go back and say how I got into this and stuff. I worked with developmental disability through college, and then I did child protective services and juvenile services. So when I came into this position, I had a lot of experience and background with rehabilitative services and that kind of stuff before. I came into the truancy and the diversion realm. So our office actually is not the county attorney's office. We are a separate entity a little bit. Our boss, like our head official, is the county attorney, but we are a separate office called Youth Services. And so we do diversion, we do grants and programs like family support and home therapy. We have a lot of information and programs that we run through this. I also have a nonprofit called Active Community Team that I help run. And that is a 501c3. So we are able to get different funding through that. Our office has 3 people. We have our ARRIVE coordinator, which ARRIVE is Absence Reduction Resources, Increasing Valuable Education. That's basically our truancy program. We just felt like truancy officer wasn't as family friendly. And we have an office manager, and then we have myself. So I do all of the programming except for truancy. And truancy, I oversee it, and then I help with cases as they become more severe, as well as the service coordination that we do with those cases. Our main focus is early intervention services with youth who begin experiencing absenteeism. We want to get involved early and intervene as early as possible, like Lane had said, to address those barriers. We are contracted with all of our schools to fill that truancy officer role. So we are countywide in Saunders County. We have about 4,000 students. So this is definitely a rural perspective, but we also cover a lot of schools and a lot of ground. So this is a lot of drive time that we have that other communities may not. We also help with Raymond Central, that's in Lancaster, because 2 of their elementaries are in our county. And then we also do services for East Butler in Butler County, because they have a lot of our students and population that work in Saunders County. Our funding for the ARRIVE program comes from the Nebraska Crime Commission, the community-based aid. And then we also get Saunders County funding. So the county actually pays for 8 hours of this position and pays for benefits. And then the grant covers 32 hours in the mileage. It gives us a little more flexibility on working with the population under that age of 11, which that Crime Commission has that that legislative hold on it, on the age range that we can work with those grant dollars. And then we also ask our county schools to contribute. It's $1 per every student K through 12. So we get their buy-in too. I feel like that financial buy-in is really important when we're working with schools in order to make them feel like they're invested in this process just as much as we are. One of the things that I feel is really helpful is we are not with the county attorney's office and we're not with the school. So when we come in, we're a completely neutral source who's unbiased, that we're just trying to help. So I think that separation helps. We're not the law coming in saying we're going to get you, and we're also not the school saying you have to do this. We're coming in and saying, how can we help? So I think that separation does help. We accept referrals from anybody. The schools are the primary one. We have had people who have self-referred. We get community-based from law enforcement, from therapists, and then also the LB 1184 treatment teams, which is that child abuse neglect team. We are members of all of these teams because we feel like getting that early intervention when they start having problems. Like Lane said, it's connected to all these other issues, right? So we are part of the treatment team so that we can also put services in before it becomes a truancy issue. So we're intervening before hopefully these kids start having attendance issues because mom was just arrested. So that's kind of our focus too, is putting services in once we see that. We're trying to get the bigger picture here. The role of the ARRIVE coordinator is they schedule and facilitate the school meetings. They're a school liaison, they're a student advocate, they're a parent advocate, they educate the parent. They refer them to resources. Our office alone, we have access to family support and home therapy. We will provide transportation, and we really guide and support them through the process, but we also hold them accountable for what they're doing and their actions. We have a bunch of different resources. You guys can read those. I'm not going to read them to you. But we do also help with applying for bonding. So we get a lot of referrals for, oh yeah, and Doug, you just said we're only able to use funds for those pre-adjudicated services to youth. So if we're attempting to be preventative, Mr. Carr mentioned youth as young as kindergarten are showing chronic absenteeism, suggestions to be preventative. So Doug, for that one, that's kind of why we have our county pay for those 8 hours and we have our schools contribute that dollar. So then we use those hours and that time in order to work with the youth outside of our grant allowed population. And so that's why we got creative with how we fund our truancy position. And our county was amazing in helping us support that. And so were the schools, so that we can do that early preventative work that our grant makes it difficult for us to do because of that. So I hope that answered your question. So we also, so one of the things we've noticed while working with these kids is a lot of them, they're very intelligent, they just have other issues, right? So mental health is a huge one. Our in-home therapy program has been around for about 1.5 years, and we have 75 referrals with 37 active cases right now, which is a lot for a county our size, especially since we have school-based therapists in all of our schools that are there every day. Every school has at least 2 days, if not more, including our private Catholic school, where they have a therapist. So we provide a lot of mental health services in our county, which I'm very thankful for, that we have Crime Commission dollars and other grant dollars to help support those programs. Our in-home therapy program also has funding so that we, from a different source, so that we can also put therapy in with elementary level families in order to do that preventative service too. So when we are utilizing these services, one of the things that we have noticed as being a member of these teams, we're a member of all of our community teams as well as our school teams. And that really helps us get a bigger picture of the youth and be able to get that wraparound support. We really focus on a team approach. One issue we have found is we have had to, and I usually help focus on this with our Arrive coordinator, is doing developmental disability applications. A lot of families don't know that process or understand that process. And we have youth who miss school because they're not getting necessarily, they're getting the services because of their IEP, but they also don't have the support in the family home. So we help get them signed up and set up with those services if we feel they qualify, and how to get that process going is often difficult. So because of our team approach, one of the things we have in our county, not necessarily, this may not be an issue with other places, but we have a lot of kids that jump around between our schools. So we have kids that'll go to Meade, they get mad at a Meade teacher or the Meade principal because they're out to get them, right? So they switch to Wahoo or they go to Ashland. So we have a lot of overlap with students in all of our schools. So we actually have a team where our schools all came together and we decided we needed a uniform countywide attendance code where everybody has the same definitions. If Meade is excusing them for one thing, but Wahoo isn't, when they're opting out and opting into one school, those absences may not line up and they may not understand. So it's almost like we're starting over with absences every time they switch schools. And so we had a lot of kids that we were kind of missing. So this has really helped us see if we have a kid switch from Meade to UTAN. We just had one that's we're struggling with who switched from Meade to Wahoo. Those absences and the definitions of them and what they were was able to go with that student, which was amazing, because then the school was able to clearly see, okay, you've missed 18 times because you chose not to go to school and you have an enabling, it's a household priority issue, right, with enabling parents who aren't making you go to school. So they were able to clearly see that. It also allows us to go in front of our public defenders, our judges. It makes it easier for our county attorney to go and say, we know that this is the absence issue that has been going on in these schools or in these areas. And it gives our judge one definition. So he doesn't have to learn, we work with 6-7 schools. He doesn't have to learn each of their attendance codes. We have one attendance code that our judge has to learn, which I think is very beneficial for the prosecutor as well as the defense attorneys and our court. We do early intervention. We get involved at that 5-day mark. So once they hit that 5-day mark, we're going to be getting involved in seeing what we can do to try to prevent future absences. We do that teamwork approach. We do incentivized programming. We have incentives that we provide. They are financial, and then we also have in-person ones. Our Arrive coordinator is amazing. She attends their games and she's just so supportive. So it makes them feel like they're not just getting someone who's coming here saying they go to school, but they're getting someone who cares. And so our motto is kind of, the most dangerous child is a child without someone to disappoint. So we give them someone to disappoint. We will provide transportation. We go and pick them up. If they have a lot of days that they've missed, we actually, our schools work with us. We have them come to our office during like Christmas break and school breaks to make up for days that they're absent. So that's really helpful. A question was, is if a student is not attending school or has missed several days, who does the school call for follow-up? So a lot of times the school will contact the parent to see why. We actually have this situation right now. A school will contact the parent to see why. If it's just because they can't get them to school, they'll call us. We work so closely with our law enforcement and with our families. We'll go pick them up, or we'll ask an officer to go pick them up. And the majority of the time, we're able to get them picked up into school. We also put family support in the homes that we're struggling with those kids. We have this is a brand new service that we just started this month, or last month, guys. So this is new for us. We already have 4 families using it, and it's amazing. We have a kid with 38 absences who has only missed 1 day in the last 2 weeks. So we're very happy we are able to offer this. We partner with law enforcement. They'll go out with us. They go out for us. They really work with these kids. Yesterday, if you were in on that, our law enforcement goes to the schools to interact with kids to have those positive relationships. So I think some of them don't go just because they want to see their friend, the cop, but that's here nor there. So we really get creative in overcoming barriers. An example would be a mom works nights and can't get up in the morning. You know, like it was for young kids too, kindergarten age. We didn't need to get involved. But so what did we do? We contacted her. Do you have a neighbor that can come over and just make sure that the kids are awake and help you get them on the bus, and make sure you're awake so you can help them get on the bus? And just that kind of creativity on utilizing our informal supports really has helped and has come a long way. Therapeutic intervention, I already talked about that. We have flexible scheduling. Our Arrive coordinator, if she can't get a hold of a parent and she's in Baumgars or Dollar General and she comes across them, guess what? She's stopping that mom and saying, "Hi, you haven't replied to anything. It's really great to see you." And she'll have an hour-long conversation in Dollar General and have her meeting. And she's amazing with that. We do it for all of our programs. We're all available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We may have a work problem here where we're just always available. We should work on our boundaries a little bit. We'll add that to our therapeutic intervention for the office. But we really make sure that we're always available. So, and she goes out of her way. If she even sees them at a football game, "Oh, hey, mom, you haven't talked to me for 3 weeks. How are you doing?" So I think having those community connections and that flexibility helps. Here's our different levels of intervention. We have several different levels because I feel like not everybody's in the same spot. 90% of the time, our warning letter that comes out from our office is enough. The school sends it too. The school lets us know that they've reached that 5 to 7. We send them a warning letter, just letting them know, and they got it. One of the things our Arrive coordinator jokes about, and her name is Carolyn Brigham, and our office manager is Melissa Tim. We all work really closely together. So Carolyn often jokes about how you really know the people who have absentee issues because they know the law like the back of their hand. So the majority of the people, you send this letter and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know." But if they get this letter and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know how many more I can miss before I get referred actually to the county attorney," like we know those are the ones we want to focus on. So once we get past that warning, if they continue to miss past that 5 to 7 mark, that's when Carolyn is going to be contacting the parent to say, "Okay, what's the issue? What can we do?" And this is when we begin communicating with them. We consider this level 1, which is just monitoring. They're active on the program, but we haven't actually contracted with them yet. This is us trying to provide intervention services before we get to the next level. Level 2, this is when we are at that 10 to 15 absence. This is when, okay, are the services we're putting in not working? Are they not complying? Then this is when we get serious and we have them sign a truancy contract. So guys, this is all pre-diversion. So keep that in mind. This has not been referred to the county attorney yet. So we develop an attendance plan. Our office is responsible for that. That's required per statute. So we do the whole team meeting, develop an attendance plan, and we get the services going to figure out what the issue is. If that doesn't work and they continue to miss, when we get over that 20-day absence, we have a county attorney hearing where our county attorney, we haven't really had to do this, but we have utilized it. A county attorney and the whole team gets together, and the county attorney basically hears the family side and the school side and makes a determination on if we should move forward with court. 99% of the time, moving forward with court just means a referral to diversion. That's what this means. And I can probably name on one hand how many times in the last 3.5 years that we've had a diversion truancy go to court. Because once it gets to diversion, it's pretty serious. We're pretty intense. We have a lot of services. We rarely file past that point. And our schools work so closely with us that we very rarely get there. We have a great partnership, which I think that's probably the most important piece to having any successful program, is being able to work closely with all of the partners at the table. So then the next level is just they come to juvenile diversion and we work with them. I do not use once they're at this level, the Arrive coordinator is out, they're on diversion. However, we don't keep them for like per quarter. They have to be successful for a semester. Okay, so like, I know that's different than a lot of programs, but we require a semester of success because we feel like anyone can fake change, but we want to see long-term change. And yes, I'll make the attendance codes and definitions available too. We can send that out with the slides, Allison. So our goal is, so I do the same for diversion. They're required to have a semester of success, but then when they get off, I'm not just going to say like, peace, like enjoy your life now. We actually have the Arrive coordinator continue to follow up with them for another semester too. So we get a full school year. If they're seniors, we handle a little differently if they're close to 18. Otherwise, any other age below senior level, this is what we're doing. We're making sure they have at least a year of supervision if they actually get on diversion. Here's just some statistics for our county. We generally average 40 to 60 referrals. And this doesn't mean we're not working with them. A lot of times they'll contact us and we'll just give them other services, but this is if they've been referred for truancy services. A lot of times we're getting those interventions in place if we have abuse, neglect, or other issues. So these are just for the truancy referrals. You can see our contracted level, how many is left open from each year, because remember, we need a full semester of them being successful. So we still have a couple on from 2017 and 18 that can't give us a full semester, but with our oversight, they seem to do much better than when we have let them off the program. And we'll keep them forever. I'm okay with that as long as they graduate. Our goal is for them to graduate. So you can see how many have been referred to diversion. Keep in mind, 2019-20 is also COVID. So that was a short year, which is why those numbers are a little lower. School shut down. And so, but we have had a lot less referrals to diversion, and our Wahoo Public School actually increased their rating because their absenteeism improved, and they were very thankful to the Youth Service Office, the County Attorney's Office for partnering, and they really credit Arrive with helping that happen. So helping make that happen. Here's just the number of referrals and our success rate. We consider our success rate, this takes out the other column into it. This does not include if the cases are still open. We have had unsuccessful discharges, but we consider our success rate that they successfully completed and graduated. The referred to a higher level, that's if they came to me for diversion. So my success rate for diversion is like 96%. So these numbers are a little skewed because this is our pre-diversion program, but it's still over 70% is amazing. Our graduation rate is amazing. I'm so proud of the work that our truancy officer does. We also track time spent versus where our active cases are. It helps us see where the more severe cases are. So we might have 2 very severe cases in one school, but 25 cases in another school that are only mild. So you can see, like for example, Cedar Bluffs in 2018-19, they had very few referrals as far as percentage wise. However, or sorry, I said that backwards. They had very few time spent, but they had a lot of referrals because they were lower risk. Whereas if you look at Wahoo, they had time spent and referrals to be kind of equal. If you look at Raymond Central, we had one really intense family that we were working with where she spent a lot of her time. So we actually only had like 2 referrals, but she spent huge amounts of time helping this kid get to school and spending time there. So our time spent and referrals are tracked to see if we're kind of matching that up and where our high need seems to generally be. So that just helps us for our data. I also do activity comparisons for our data to see direct contact with families versus other in-office training holiday, just to track to make sure that we're doing the direct contact we need to do. And also of direct contact, the more time we spend with these families, are they showing that they're more successful? And what we're finding is, yes, they are. And that's all I have for mine. Does anyone have any questions? Can you explain the types of services and requirements of the youth when they get to the diversion level? Yes. So once they get to my level, I make them, so I do my own programming. So I do make them meet with me. I stopped share, Chris, so you can work on getting yours up while I answer the questions. So I do make them meet with me every other week. They have to have C or above for grades. Their attendance has to improve. If they're not going to school, I use the threat, I'll come sit with you. I've done that before, where I go and pick them up and then I sit with them. They love that. Some of the other things I do, they have to write a paper. I make them do a curriculum with me. They have to participate. I have them do a mental health screening, and they have to participate in therapy. Generally, 9 times out of 10, I'm finding it's just because they have severe anxiety. And once you've missed so many days, you feel like you're already like in a boat with 2 huge holes and you're sinking, and you can't figure out how to, you just keep trying to get the water out, but you keep sinking and you can't figure out how to fix those holes. So we kind of help them fix those holes so they don't feel like they're drowning, and we give them a life vest. And so we really work with the schools, and they're amazing on not making them catch up on 7,000 assignments. So it's just absolutely a good partnership on saying, okay, let's start here and move forward and do the best we can, so they don't feel like they're jumping into a big pit. We are getting more, no, our referrals have been about the same. I have noticed that more people do take advantage of COVID. Everybody seems to come in contact with someone who has COVID, and they have to quarantine for 2 weeks every 15 days. So that's been awesome. So even though our school is saying, no, they never said they had to quarantine. So we are struggling a little bit more with COVID, but generally those are the families that we expected to be doing that anyway, because we are such a tight-knit county. We know the families that are taking advantage of it, and our schools know the families so well to determine if they've missed 18 days, but they know this family really gets their kids to school and things are great. They're not going to be referring them to us. But if they've missed 6 days and they know this family has a long history of taking advantage, then they're going to be getting that referral. And for school-based therapy, Cody, no, I think you guys our school-based therapists are just doing really great. If I have anything for the school-based therapist as far as diversion or truancy, I always reach out. And if you guys have any like parts of the program that you want or whatever, we'll make the slides available, and you can also contact me. I will put my contact information in the comments, as well as Chris and Lane's. Otherwise, I think my time is up, and I'll answer the questions individually, and I will let Chris take over.
All right, thanks, Amber. I appreciate that. And I just sit here and I listen to what Lane has to say and see a lot of truth in that from my experience getting to work with schools in my county, but also just getting to hear Amber talk about what they're doing in Saunders County and the great work that they do really up front as a county agency, I think is just amazing. So I'm going to talk a little bit with you today about what we do in Lancaster County. And I would say where Amber has a very good focus up front, talking maybe 5 days of absence, what the interventions look like from their office. In my jurisdiction, we're going to back that up a little bit. It's going to be really at 10 days to 20 days is where our involvement really becomes heavier. So I'll kind of walk through with you what that looks like. And maybe I'll just start off with, as I mentioned, I've been a prosecutor now for about 11 years, 13 years total in the office, including law school. And like a lot of prosecutors, my introduction into criminal prosecution, working in a county attorney's office, was prosecuting crimes. And so when I began 2 years ago as the chief deputy of our juvenile division, where we have myself and 5 other attorneys that handle all the abuse, neglect cases, juvenile law violators, and habitual truancy cases, my focus had been for years and years and years, prosecution, punishment, consequences, and that was the answer. And so it's been a shift for me to really think about what intervention is best for this particular problem and this particular youth. And there's lots of scenarios where it's not the courtroom and it's not probation. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about how we've developed our programs here locally over the last few years and how we've continued to try to expand those to meet the needs of the students that we have coming in for habitual truancy. Primarily what I'll be talking about is the partnership between our office and the Lincoln Public Schools. We have 10 different school districts within Lancaster County. Lincoln Public Schools is by far the largest. And as someone that prosecuted juvenile offenses about 10 years ago, what I can tell you is that the process that we have with Lincoln Public Schools and as the county attorney's office is vastly different. So 10 years ago, it would be very common for a referral to come into my office, and it would just have an attendance record and say, this student missed 20 days. My office would look at it and say, yep, they missed 20 days. We would file a case and we would show up into court. Now there's a lot more thought that goes into it, both in the school's end and the work with the family. And then on our end, as the county attorney's office, really trying to figure out what are the barriers to attendance, and then ensuring that we're really matching the right intervention with those barriers. To give you a little bit of an idea of what our primary school district looks like, it's one of the largest in Nebraska. So over 40,000 students. That's been pretty consistent for the last 5 years or so. When Lane talks about economically disadvantaged youth and the correlation between that and seeing attendance concerns, we have a pretty high percentage of our students that are accessing free and reduced lunch. And really what I think this shows is that we have students kind of all across the spectrum, different cultural backgrounds, different social economic backgrounds. There's just a large array of different barriers that our schools and our administrators and our counselors are trying to work with students on before they ever even start reaching out to me as a county attorney's office, maybe seeking some sort of court-based intervention or a diversion-based intervention. When we look at how we do, and Lane had showed kind of that heat map of attendance and the different areas within the state and those attendance rates, Lincoln historically has been really good. And those habitual attendance issues and the daily attendance rates have been pretty favorable for Lincoln Public Schools over the years. So we see last year we had a 95.5% average daily attendance rate, which is exceptional. And so very proud of that. And I know the folks with our school district, they work really hard and they focus really hard. And part of that, just like what Amber was saying, is it's a partnership. And so I would encourage you in your jurisdictions, if you haven't developed that partnership yet, really work at it, because we can assist each other. We can leverage each other's strengths to both achieve the same goal, which is ensuring as many students as we can possibly get into school every single day are there and they're getting their work done and they're being successful. So hopefully they're graduating high school at the end of that. One thing that our schools do, and I get to work with our schools pretty much every day. I'm meeting with either a middle school or a high school administration team, but they are constantly looking at their own attendance and they're identifying those students with attendance concerns. And so not only will they look at, okay, this year's attendance and how is a student doing, who are the students maybe at the top of the list for the school with attendance issues, but they're also looking at prior years. And so that's digging a little bit deeper to see, well, what was that student's attendance like last year? How did they do in elementary school? What was their attendance like in middle school now if we have a ninth grader or a freshman at one of our high schools, to see, is this a trend, and is this a trend that's getting worse? And we're going to really try to identify that student earlier to try to get an intervention in place sooner. Other things that they're going to look at are trends among the family. So if we're meeting with middle school administration, it's very common for us to start talking about are there siblings, how are their attendance looking, and try to coordinate a response across schools, because we're commonly having a student in elementary, maybe another in middle, and another in high school. So we want to get kind of a total picture of what attendance looks like for all the students in that family. The collaboration for my office, for the Lancaster County Attorney's Office, and for Lincoln Public Schools starts before the school year begins. And so I have a chance to meet with members of the district office that really are a high level within the Lincoln Public Schools to talk about attendance. And we'll spend a lot of time on that. So one thing we'll always go through are there any attendance policy changes that the school district is going to make for the year? Or are there any kind of nuances that might be coming up that I need to know about as far as a county attorney? Or maybe it's an opportunity for me to share, some questions or share some concerns with whatever policies they're thinking about implementing. So at least they have the information, and I'm not surprising them maybe 3 or 4 months down the road with a concern that I didn't raise over the summer that could have been maybe addressed. One example of that would be like Amber mentioned with COVID. Well, what's our response to COVID, and how is the county attorney's office, how are we going to look at issues with attendance surrounding quarantining or being out for possible exposure? Or for us, really, in our school district, there was a move and an ability to go remote learning. And what will we do as students who there is no expectation that they're physically going to be in the building, but there is the expectation their parent has decided to have them remote learn and use Zoom and use one of these platforms to enter the class? Well, what if they're not logging into Zoom? Is that going to be counted as a truancy? What if they log into Zoom, but then they don't do anything and their screen is always black and they never answer a question and they don't respond to anything and they don't participate in the chats? Well, is that a truancy? Is that an unexcused absence? And by meeting over the summer and having those relationships in place, we're able to talk through all of that as kind of a team and at least be on the same page for what is the school's expectations? What do I think legally that would allow me to do? What would be legally sufficient if I had to present that case to a judge to try to get an intervention, maybe eventually at the end of the system, which would be a court intervention and looking at probation. One other thing that we spent a lot of time on with our partnership is looking at documentation. So our school district uses a standardized collaborative plan. So like Amber said, her staff is really involved in that, sounds like that collaborative plan process. Myself and my diversion officers are not. That is really the way we have our process in place is that's a school process. And so they're going to develop the collaborative plan. They're going to walk through the barriers to attendance. And my ability is I get to weigh in and look at that document that they've done, and I get to help prepare that document to ensure not only is it meeting all of the statutorily required elements to be addressed during a collaborative plan, because there's a statute that says, okay, now these are the 7 things that have to be discussed every single time you have a collaborative plan. Not only do I get to see that and make sure that that looks correct and in line with the statute, but I also get a look at that with the eye of an attorney that eventually may have to prove that all of those potential barriers were addressed and any potential defenses that I think could come up if a case had to be presented in court. So I get to add in some additional check boxes and information to ensure that the parents have been given all the information, they've signed off on it, they've been given all the resources and they've signed off and they've acknowledged that as part of that collaborative plan process. And really the idea is it puts myself in a much better position and my attorneys in a much better position if we need a court intervention to have that. We have a solid case and a solid process that's been followed and it's very consistent. So that's part of what we do in the summer. Another thing that we do each summer is I go out and I speak to every single administrator within Lincoln Public Schools. The public schools will hold usually 4 or 5 large meetings, and it's elementary school, it is middle school, and it's high school administrators. I think our elementary schools, we maybe have 40, middle schools, we have 12, and then high schools, we have 6. We also have a few other behavioral programs or kind of specialized programs for students as well. So all those administrators get to hear a message from me about attendance. That's a big piece of what I talk to them about. We talk about legislative updates, and for all of you that work in this area, the legislature likes to go in and make little tweaks to these attendance statutes. They made some very big tweaks about 5 or 6 years ago. Last year, we all saw an additional barrier added that had to be included and considered as far as collaborative plans. This year in 2020, there were some additional legislative changes that really just made, I think, some minor tweaks to some language to really highlight the need to address potential mental health barriers as part of that collaborative plan process. But we talk about those with the administration team. We talk about any changes in the attendance process. And I get a chance as a county attorney to talk through what am I looking at when I'm determining to put an intervention in place like diversion, or an intervention in place like a probation officer in court. And so those are all things that we talk about through those summer meetings.
Hey, Chris, there's a question, and Lane answered a piece of it too by saying schools are working directly with those employers. But how do you assist with cultural barriers where employment is more important than education?
That's a difficult one, and some of our families are in positions. I definitely would be open to Lane jumping in on this one too. But some of our families are in positions where we see a common thread that, for example, every time we have a elementary plan day, so we have elementary students that have to be home, we see the older middle school siblings also at home, because we know the middle school sibling has to watch the elementary school sibling during those off days. And really, I think it starts with communication. It talks about the parents. And again, like you had said, try to be creative and brainstorming with the parent. Is there some alternative so we're not having to rely upon the older sibling to be home to help supervise the other children? Can we get a family friend involved for those days? Can we think about getting, we have YMCA, we have different programs in the elementary schools. And it really starts at that piece with communicating with the parents to let them know, hey, this is our priority, and your student in the middle school is really going to be at a big deficit here, missing these extra days. Let's try to find some other sort of maybe answer or resolution to that problem. So after the summer is over and the school year begins, we're going to continue to collaborate between myself and the public school. And this is just kind of an outline of what the process looks like with Lincoln Public Schools. From the school district side, they'll send a notification daily each time a student has a period of truancy or parent acknowledged your illness. There is an automated system that sets up, and it'll call the parent or it'll email the parent to say, your student missed a class period this day. As those truancies or as those unexcused absences begin to accumulate, they're going to send out what's called stage letters at 5, 10, 15, and 20 days. And those are standardized letters that essentially puts the parent and the student on notice that those attendances or absences are being watched, that there needs to be some attention to that, and that at some point, if it continues to kind of accelerate and get worse, there may be interventions in place. So that intervention of the collaborative plan in our system happens at 10 days. So when a student reaches 10 days of unexcused absence, the school will reach out to the parent and set up a meeting to hold that collaborative plan. Always have been done in person. Now we're doing those largely remotely with school administrators using Zoom or using telephone to hold the collaborative plans. And we sometimes are talking as teams, who else needs to be part of that meeting? Is there a school nurse? Because there are some legitimate medical issues that are maybe being a barrier to attendance. Does the student already have a therapist? Can we get a release sign and get them to be part of this collaborative plan process? Is the student old enough to really be able to participate in this meeting themselves? So if it's a second grader, probably not appropriate to have them be part of that collaborative plan process. But if it's an 8th grader, if it's a 9th grader, definitely we want them to be part of it. So they're sharing what they think the barriers are, because they may have information that they haven't told their parent. If they are being bullied at school or they're having some sort of conflict with a staff member, we may need to get that information out in the open so it can be discussed and it can be addressed.
Okay, we got a question. What about the kids who have to work to help support the family, therefore they miss it because of that, so like economic hardship? And Anita said she sees it quite a bit in one school district in Saline County.
I would say that's not an issue I see a lot of in my jurisdiction. We certainly have some of it, and those students that are legitimately having that issue and that's causing them not to come to school, those are often the students that we see that do decide to drop out, that they will claim a financial hardship that they indicate that requires them to not attend school, and it's their decision at that point not to attend school. And so I don't have a good answer, really good expertise to give you. Maybe I see Lane's jumped on here. He might have some ideas.
Yeah, sure. It's a really important question. And actually, we've seen a slight increase in the number of just like anecdotal cases of students that are in schools that are encountering this. Down below, I did share a really interesting article that came out in June from the Urban Institute, titled Making Education and Employment Work for High School Students. And it comes up with some really interesting things that would rely upon you also having the schools and the businesses together at the same table to brainstorm for that kid. So giving high school credit for the student that is working, like the on-job site, that's work-based learning. We encourage work-based learning. And then also creating flexible schedules, both at the employer's space and the school space. So thinking creatively through that. So I would just point you again to that Urban Institute article. It has some really great resources. So just wanted to share that with you.
And then for us, one of the things that we have done, because we have a school that has high poverty rates in our county, is we have worked with the school a lot on rearranging their schedules. So we know if they have to work more, then maybe we put their core classes in the morning and then they can leave school early at 2 o'clock. So what they are missing isn't something that's going to impact their ability to graduate. And then also working with them on getting credit for their work education that they're getting, because that is something that some schools can do. It's a valuable resource.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing as part of that collaborative process that we do also is, for those of you that work in this area, you know that there is a statutory obligation for county attorneys to offer community-based resources to families before I can ever consider filing a case. And at the same point, ethically as a prosecutor, I can't even utilize a diversion program unless we've met all of the requirements by state law that would allow me, if I had chosen to file a case in court. So unless we follow this collaborative plan process and all the required people are present, I ethically can't even allow a diversion program to be implemented for a student, even if I know, gosh, that would really help them out. And the same thing, I can't file a case in juvenile court if we haven't, as a county attorney's office, offered community-based resources. So the way our jurisdiction does that and the way our office does that is through providing a resource letter that we give to the schools. It's a standardized letter that the school fills out the information on, and then they provide it to the family at the time of the collaborative plan. So at 10 days of absence, each of the families is getting this, and you won't be able to read it. If anyone wants a copy, I'd be happy to share it. But what this letter basically does is it just identifies, hey, I'm with the county attorney's office. I've been made aware that your student is having issues with attendance. Here are some community-based resources available to you. We give them a number of websites that can help address attendance barriers. And what we also do is we have a truancy specialist that works out of our diversion office that is available on a voluntary basis for these families that have reached that 10 days of unexcused absence. They can contact this person and they can reach out to her and say, hey, these are the issues I have and I can't get my kid to school, or I'm having issues with transportation. I'm having issues with mental health or anxiety. And our truancy specialists can walk them through all of the community-based resources and make referrals. Sometimes it's parent training that's necessary about holding their teenager accountable. And this is a resource that we really ask our administration team to look at and say, hey, family, we're giving you some paperwork here, and maybe you're going to just not really read through all of it. But let me highlight this phone number, because when you need help, we want you to call this person right here so that they can talk through with you what we have available in Lancaster County to try to help you and your student out. The other thing we do as a process piece then is that our truancy specialist keeps really good records. So each time a family does reach out for help, that's documented. And so that's part of the statutory obligation that we have. So it's important that we document that information, because if it does need to at some point go into the courts, we'd be able to call that person as a witness and have them explain what was offered, what was discussed, and then what the response was. And obviously, if we're getting to the point of going to court, that intervention was not successful. Another thing that our office does throughout the school year is I meet what we call SMART team meetings. We do them on a monthly basis, and I go in. Before COVID, it was personally, I'd go into each middle school, each high school, each month, usually about an hour or so. We'd spend talking through different students and concerns that the administration team would have. But really the purpose of that, and I think as it relates to attendance, which is just one piece that we talk about, we're talking about those students that have reached that 10 days, and the administration team might have questions about collaborative plans, or gosh, what do I do I'm having no luck getting a hold of mom and dad. They won't respond to me at all when I try to set up this collaborative plan. What should I do next? And we can talk through and brainstorm ideas about how to engage the parent. And we also can brainstorm, and I can give them direction on what's legally required under not only the statute, but under the case law to engage that parent and how we document those things so that we can get an intervention at some point if a parent did not participate with the collaborative plan. Other things that we do, go ahead, Amber.
All right, Chris, we got a question. And I don't know where it fits in, so I'm just interrupting, sorry. How does LB 595 and the use of restorative practices fit into your work? And would this be an example of community-based resources?
Yeah, I think certainly that would be an example. One thing that's one of the barriers now that you have to address is our restorative justice practices, something that would assist in identifying or addressing a barrier. And that's usually where our administration team is talking to the student and the parent about, is there some sort of conflict with another classmate? Is there a conflict with a teacher? We have specialists within our school district that are trained in restorative justice practices that are really specialized and actually go, I think, kind of across the region and the country to do trainings. And our schools can then access that specialist person to come in and try to do a circle to maybe do a restorative justice practice. I'll also talk here in a minute about the mediation center that we have here in Lincoln that we utilize as part of our restorative justice practices to assist in attendance in a new program that we've started doing, what we call truancy circles. One other benefit for these SMART team meetings that I find extremely valuable is I get to learn about the students that maybe have concerns with abuse and neglect, and that's one of the topic areas we're always going to discuss. And the information is shared both ways. So if they have concerns about a student and they maybe have some cause to believe that student could be subjected to abuse and neglect, we're going to talk through how to make appropriate calls to the HHS hotline. I'm also going to provide them with information about, well, I can see on my end here that we have 3 open cases involving drug investigations with that parent, or they have a prior conviction for domestic assault. So we should really keep a good eye on what your student is reporting back to you if they're seeing this person back in the home now. Maybe there's a no contact order in place or a protection order in place. So all of that, again, is designed to make sure that the student's safe, the student's in a place, hopefully, to be successful, not only at the home environment, but in the school environment. If it does get to the final phase where a student's reached the 20 days of unexcused absence, then we're looking at a referral becoming necessary to my office. And usually I'm asking them to wait at least 30 days after the collaborative plan, really have the school work that plan, try to work the interventions that they've developed, and hopefully that's going to be successful. And oftentimes it is. Oftentimes that collaborative plan process really does do a great job in identifying what's happening that's preventing attendance and what needs to be done to get things back on track. And if it doesn't, though, then the schools can make that referral to me. And I'm hoping when I identify for them the information I want as part of that referral to get a big picture look. I don't want to see just an attendance record that says this student missed 25 days. I need to decide what intervention is going to be best. I need a historical view of that student's attendance and their grades and their credits, and then all of the efforts that the school has made already to partner with the family. 2 of the programs that we have in Lancaster County, the first is a middle school truancy diversion program. We're just starting that this year. This is kind of just an outline of what our program process looks like from a county attorney perspective. And it really starts there at the beginning with, is there sufficient evidence? And if there's not sufficient evidence, there's not going to be any intervention from my office. It's going to be referred back to the school, probably with some ideas about how to collect the information that would be necessary to get a court or a truancy diversion intervention at some point. Middle schoolers would be, if it looks like they're going to be eligible, there's sufficient evidence to prove that they have been habitually truant, there's going to be a school refusal assessment that's completed on the front end. That information then comes back to me as the county attorney to review that total packet of information from the school, from our diversion officer who's done the school refusal assessment, so interviews of both the student and the parent. And then I'm going to make a decision about, is truancy diversion look like an appropriate intervention, or do I need to go into the juvenile court and the probation side? If it goes into the truancy diversion program, they're going to have a diversion officer assigned. There's going to be partnering with the school and then partnering with our mediation center, who's going to hold a truancy circle which would include not only the parent and the student, someone from the school, but the diversion officer is going to be there, and we're going to have a professional mediator who, again, is there to brainstorm the barriers and the potential, and really try to come up with some creative solutions to get that student re-engaged. And this program, the student has to have at least 60 days of significant improvement in attendance and passing grades before they're going to be eligible to successfully graduate our middle school truancy diversion program. The other program we have, this program has been around about 9 years now, is a high school truancy diversion program. So 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Looks pretty similar as far as the referral process. The school refusal assessment is still done, but we do that as part of once they've entered the program. But here's a program that we have that really relies heavily on the school. The school social worker is really the one driving the bus on the intervention. But it's a team approach between a school social worker, the student, the parent, and my office. And I'll kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what that looks like. So this truancy diversion program for our high schoolers starts off, again, they've been referred in. If they've been offered the program, then they'll enter the program, and the expectations are that they're going to twice a month meet with the principal at their school social worker, their parent, myself, and their therapist to discuss, are they meeting the expectations? And the basic expectations are, you need to cooperate with counseling or what we have, family support services that would, if they don't need individual therapy and we have an evaluation that's provided to them for free, if the recommendation is not for individual therapy, the vast majority are, but if it's not, they're going to have family support, which is going to help them with kind of organizational skills, maybe waking up, setting alarms, getting homework done, but they need to participate in that service. They have to participate in academic supports. If they don't have all passing grades, the expectation is going to be that they're going to stay after school in one of the academic support programs until they have all passing grades. The passing grades is a prerequisite to successfully graduate the program, and they have to have a significant improvement in attendance. And so as we monitor those things twice per month, we're going to meet as a team with the student right there to talk about and have them tell us, how are you doing with your grades? Show us where they're at. And we're going to have, where are you missing assignments at? What's your attendance look like? Why'd you miss this day? Where were you at during those 3 periods? And there's going to be some accountability from the team. There's definitely also going to be lots of positive encouragement. When the program is explained to the family at the front end and to the student, they're told, what the other option is. And the other option is a probation and juvenile court system. That's the other one. And we tell them, really what the benefit is to them is this process is going to start today. We know if I file a truancy case and a lawyer is appointed and we have a trial, or if they enter a plea and then probation gets involved, that's 60 to 90 days easily that's being lost in between the time of a referral and the time the intervention starts. Our truancy diversion program, we can start much, much faster. From the student's perspective, there's no possibility of going out of home. I don't have the authority to do that. I don't have the authority to drug test them. And they can, on a much faster pace, get their case over with and their case sealed and be successful. The other thing that we try to ensure is lots of positive encouragement. We give out lots of incentives. That's something that our program really tries to be focused on. So we have gift cards for fast food, movie tickets, mall gift cards. And as they're meeting those expectations, they're going to get those incentives. And that really has been a big driver for us in seeing a positive turnaround from some students that, historically, maybe over 2 years, have just had awful attendance. But with these supports, with the therapy, and with the encouragement, we do see a lot of positive improvement. We've had an analysis done. The University of Nebraska, we're lucky enough to have them right here in our backyard. And the Center on Children, Family, and the Law have researchers that have taken a look at our program. And this is the results from a 3-year study that they did. And you can see there, only about a 50% successful completion rate for these students. And you think about it, these are students that have likely had habitual truancy for multiple years. They're already over 20 days. So it's a difficult problem that usually has lots of layers of barriers that need to be addressed, but about 50% are successful, 50% are referred back to the court system and probation. But what they found in that 3-year review was a really demonstrated difference in improving attendance, but only for about 4 quarters. And so if we look at on the left-hand side, the pre-truancy diversion rates. On average, our students, when they were entering truancy diversion, the quarter before had missed about 8.5 days of unexcused absence. So, you do the multiplication on that, we're talking 30 days plus for a year before they enter the program. Once they graduate the program, immediately following that, we're down to 3 days of unexcused absence. After 4 quarters, we're at 5.5 days, a little bit more. And then after that, though, we're back up to 8 days. So what we really learned from that study, and this is kind of shown in another way, comparing the students that entered truancy diversion and were successful, that blue bar, versus the students that entered truancy diversion and were not successful, but were returned to court. What did those, how did those look at different? And I think Lane kind of pointed out, what you can see sometimes is that the interventions that we offer to the court system, even though I think they're necessary, we need to do something. Sometimes they can have the unintended consequence, and we're not really seeing a big improvement. And but we do see there are truancy diversion students that are successful after completion. We do see a significant improvement compared to their counterparts who were not successful. And that's kind of the overview of the Lancaster County program. I'll ask Amber and Lane to both unmute themselves. I think we would be happy to answer any other questions that Amber might see on the chat.
So far, there aren't any other questions popping up. Lane, did you have anything?
No, I just think that both of your programs, Amber and Chris, demonstrate how it takes such a community response. It can't be schools dealing with this on their own. It has to be community, family, policymakers, county attorneys, youth services. It takes truly that whole village approach. And so just really encouraged by your programs. Think of them as real exemplars for what I would love to see around the state even further. So thanks for sharing your examples.
Absolutely. So if anybody is interested in seeing the documents that we use for the kind of the outline of the plans that we have for our diversion programs, I'd be happy to share those if you shoot me an email at the email address listed here on the slide.
Okay, question for you, Chris. Do you refer to the truancy diversion program prior to filing?
In our middle school, yes. In our high school version, no, because that program, when it first started, it was a court-based. We don't proceed forward with the filing, but what will happen is we actually file a case. They'll come in. The judge explains to them what the truancy diversion program is that they have an option to participate in. Overwhelmingly, 95% want to do that, and then their case just remains open until they successfully complete the program. It just kind of acts as a placeholder. So they see the judge one time, and then after that, they are fully just in the school.
And then do you address links referrals?
Yes, so that's something that we have available to us. We've got a great partnership and funding available to do mental health evaluations and referrals to our what we call links assessments. And that's something that our elementary schools, our middle schools, our high schools will use. And we just have a process basically in place that allows them to do that assessment as long as the youth's not already at probation involved or a state ward. There's just kind of a quick check of the records that I do to make sure that they're eligible. And then we refer them off to a mental health professional to do that evaluation that really can be a good jump starter to identify resources as well.
Okay, it looks like that's all the questions. As they said, we'll